The Aegean Sea in the spring of 1900 is a heavy, pressing weight. For Elias Stadiatis, the world is reduced to the rhythmic sound of his own breathing and the dim, filtered light of the Mediterranean. He is a sponge diver, a man used to the yielding textures of the seabed, where life is soft, organic, and slow. He moves through the water near the jagged coast of Antikythera, searching for the dark, velvety clusters of sponges that provide his livelihood. The seabed here is a chaotic landscape of silt and stone. As Elias kicks along the bottom, his foot strikes something that does not behave like the surrounding terrain. It is not the blunt resistance of a limestone reef, nor is it the crumbly texture of coral. It is a sharp, unyielding jar that vibrates up through his leg. He pauses, hovering in the blue gloom, and reaches down into the sand. His fingers brush against a surface that feels unnervingly intentional. It is hard and flat, lacking the irregular ridges of a natural rock. Beneath the layer of fine silt, there is a sense of geometry, a suggestion of something crafted rather than grown. In the quiet darkness of the deep, Elias feels a flicker of unease. The ocean is a place of ruins, but this feels different. It feels like an intrusion. He pushes against the object, trying to discern its shape, but the sea is thick with sediment. He only knows that he has found something that does not belong to the natural world, a ghost of metal waiting in the dark. The surface of the water is a frantic, sunlit contrast to the silence below. When Elias and his crew finally break the waves, they are not just bringing up sponges. They are bringing up a catastrophe of history. The recovery is a chaotic, desperate affair. The divers have stumbled upon a massive Roman shipwreck, a vessel that likely sank while carrying the absolute height of Mediterranean luxury. As the baskets are hauled up, the deck of the boat becomes a graveyard of antiquity. There are marble statues, their white limbs stained by the salt, and heavy bronze ornaments that catch the midday sun. The crew works with a feverish energy, driven by the sheer value of the haul. Amidst this scramble for treasure, a small, dark and heavily encrusted lump is pulled from the depths. It looks nothing like the elegant marble heads or the gleaming bronze vessels. It is a jagged, irregular mass, looking more like a discarded piece of a broken anchor than a work of art. Yet, as the divers pass it from hand to hand, they notice its weight. It is unexpectedly dense, a heavy, stubborn presence that seems to pull at the very air around it. It sits among the luxury goods, a silent, mud-caked intruder. No one at the moment realizes that this heavy, unremarkable clump of oxidation is the most significant object ever to rise from the wreck. By the time the artifacts reach the archaeologists in Athens, the excitement has begun to wane. To the experts peering through magnifying glasses, the object is a disappointment. It sits on a wooden table, looking like nothing more than a calcified piece of scrap metal. It is a grim, uninviting thing, covered in a thick, crusty layer of green and brown oxidation. The texture is rough and uneven, a landscape of salt and mineral deposits that have fused into a single, impenetrable shell. It is the color of old copper and dried seaweed. When the scholars examine it, they see only the decay. They see the result of 2,000 years of violent chemistry, where the salt of the Aegean has spent centuries eating away at whatever lay beneath. There is a certain irony in its survival. The marble statues around it have suffered chips and breaks, but they remain recognizable. This object, however, has retreated into itself. It has become a fortress of corrosion. The archaeologists note its presence in their logs, but they do not linger. They see a lump of bronze that has lost its soul to the sea. They do not yet realize that the corrosion is not just a layer of damage, but a protective shroud. The very crust that makes it look like junk is the only thing keeping the delicate, mathematical heart of the machine from dissolving into nothingness. By 1971, the object is a fixture of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, but it remains a mystery. It is a silent, calcified lump that most visitors walk past without a second glance. That changes when Derek de Solla Price arrives. Price is a historian of science, a man who looks at old machines and sees the fingerprints of human thought. He does not see a piece of scrap metal. He sees a problem that requires a new kind of light. He brings with him the tools of the modern age, specifically X-ray technology, to pierce the fortress of corrosion that has protected the device for 2 millennia. The process is slow and meticulous. As the X-ray plates are developed, the initial images are murky, but then the truth begins to emerge through the shadows. Price stares at the plates, and the world of classical archaeology shifts beneath his feet. He is not looking at the chaotic texture of sea salt or the uneven pits of bronze decay. Instead, he sees lines. He sees curves. He sees the unmistakable, sharp geometry of interlocking teeth. The X-rays reveal a hidden architecture of bronze gears nested inside one another like a mechanical heart. These are not the random shapes of nature, but the deliberate, calculated creations of a craftsman. Finding Hellenistic engineering inside a lump of sea junk is a shock that ripples through the academic community. It is as if a researcher looking at a piece of ancient pottery suddenly found a microchip embedded in the clay. Price realizes that the corrosion has not just been a shroud, but a vault, preserving a level of mechanical sophistication that should not, by all known accounts, exist. As Price digs deeper into the X-ray data, the machine begins to speak. It is not a decorative piece or a simple tool. It is a mind made of metal. He begins to notice small, fragmentary inscriptions etched into the bronze, visible only under intense scrutiny. One of the most significant leads is the mention of the Metonic cycle, a period of 19 years used to reconcile the lunar and solar calendars. This is the first clue that the device is not just a clock, but a computer. Price begins the painstaking work of mapping the gear ratios. He treats the bronze fragments like a mathematical puzzle, calculating how the movement of one gear might drive another. The results are staggering. He discovers that the gear teeth are designed to mimic the complex, irregular movements of the heavens. By adjusting the spacing and the number of teeth, the maker had managed to account for the way the moon appears to speed up and slow down in its orbit. The device is a celestial navigator. It tracks the sun, the moon, and the predictable patterns of the stars with a precision that feels almost modern. When the gears turn, they do not just tell the time, they tell the position of the cosmos. Price realizes he is looking at a device that could predict eclipses and lunar phases with terrifying accuracy. It is a clockwork map of the universe, a way for an ancient person to hold the entire sky in the palm of their hand. The machine is not merely recording time, it is simulating the very mechanics of the heavens. The discovery forces historians to rethink the entire map of ancient intelligence. If such a machine existed, where was it born? The mechanical complexity points towards certain intellectual hubs of the Mediterranean. Scholars begin to look towards Syracuse, in Sicily, the home of Archimedes. There are records of Archimedes building spheres that modeled the motions of the planets, and the gear work. in the Antikythera mechanism bears a haunting resemblance to those lost descriptions. The lineage of the device seems to flow through the great schools of the Hellenistic age. Some researchers point to the island of Rhodes, a center for astronomy and the home of the astronomer Hipparchus. The mathematical rigor required to build such a device suggests a person who sat at the intersection of high geometry and master metalworking. It is a marriage of the philosopher and the blacksmith. Yet, the machine remains a lonely object. There is no record of a factory or a massive industrial workshop that could produce such things. This suggests that the device may not be a product of a standard industry, but the masterpiece of a single, unnamed genius. It is the work of a person who understood the language of mathematics so deeply that they could translate it into the language of bronze. As scholars trace these connections, they realize that the Antikythera mechanism is a ghost of a lost tradition, a flickering light from a world where science and art were one and the same. The fragments of the mechanism sit in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, but they are not stable. To the naked eye, they look like nothing more than petrified wood or chunks of sea stone. In reality, they are a delicate chemical battlefield. For 2,000 years, the bronze rested in the cold, oxygen-deprived silence of the Mediterranean seabed. It was a state of suspended animation. But once the divers hauled those pieces into the light, the clock began to tick in a different way. As soon as the bronze met the air, the chemistry changed. Oxygen began to bite into the metal, fueling a slow, microscopic oxidation that threatened to turn the gears into dust. Every time a researcher moved a fragment or adjusted a display case, they risked a structural collapse. The very act of studying the object was an act of destruction. Scholars realized they were in a desperate race against time. The most precious parts of the mechanism were not just the gears, but the inscriptions. Tiny, hand-etched Greek characters were carved into the surface of the bronze, providing the manual for the machine. These letters were so shallow and so worn by centuries of salt and silt that they were nearly invisible. If the corrosion continued to bloom, those inscriptions would flake away, taking the machine's voice with them. There was a growing, quiet panic among the curators. They had to find a way to see what was written before the bronze itself decided to vanish. In 2005, the race finally found its most powerful weapon. A group of researchers known as the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project turned away from traditional photography and toward the cutting edge of medical technology. They brought in the Aegean team, specialists in high-resolution X-ray computed tomography. They were not looking at the surface of the bronze, but through it. The machine was placed inside a CT scanner, the kind used to peer inside the human skull to find a tumor. But instead of flesh and bone, the scanner bounced thousands of X-rays through the calcified lumps of the mechanism. As the digital reconstruction began to form on computer screens, the team saw things that no human eye could have witnessed in a century of study. Hidden deep within the layers of corrosion, the scanner revealed the impossible. They found tiny, handwritten Greek text tucked away on the underside of the fragments, protected by the very crust that had hidden them. The text was not just decoration, it was a user guide. One of the most stunning revelations was a small, inscribed calendar. It listed the dates for the Pan-Hellenic Games, including the Olympics. The machine was not just a tool for astronomers, but a bridge between the heavens and the social life of the ancient world. The digital light had finally pierced the dark. The data coming out of the CT scans did more than just reveal text. It revealed a level of engineering that felt like a mistake in the historical record. As the researchers mapped the internal structures, they found something that defied every existing theory of ancient Greek technology. They discovered an epicyclic gear system. These were gears mounted on other gears, a sophisticated way to model the complex, looping paths that planets appear to take across the sky. The math was terrifyingly precise. The device did not just track the sun and the moon. It predicted solar and lunar eclipses with an accuracy that would not be matched for another 1,000 years. It accounted for the slight variations in the moon's speed, a mathematical nuance that should have been impossible for a civilization without modern calculus. This discovery created a massive, uncomfortable gap in our understanding of history. We used to believe that such complex mechanical computation was a product of the Renaissance, a leap forward made by the clockmakers of Europe. But the Antikythera mechanism proves that this knowledge existed much, much earlier. It suggests that the ancient world was not just a place of philosophy and marble statues, but a place of intense mechanical genius. The device stands as a mathematical miracle, a reminder that we often underestimate the shadows cast by the past. The fragments of the mechanism sit today in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. They are no longer just a calcified lump of bronze or a mystery for X-ray machines. They have become a bridge. When we look at those tiny corroded teeth, we are seeing the distant, mechanical ancestors of the silicon chips in our pockets. The device represents the very first moment in human history where we attempted to compress the infinite complexity of the heavens into a handheld machine. It is the birth of the computer, written in copper and tin. There is a certain silent dignity to the pieces. They are fragile, held behind glass, looking less like a tool and more like a relic of a lost religion. We study them with lasers and computers, yet they remain stubbornly, beautifully ancient. They remind us that progress is not a straight line. It is a series of peaks and valleys where brilliant heights can be lost to the sea and forgotten for centuries. I find myself thinking about the time it spent in the dark. For 2,000 years it lay in the silt and the salt, tucked away near the coast of Antikythera. It sat in total silence while empires rose and fell, while the very mathematics it modeled changed hands across the globe. It waited in the crushing weight of the Mediterranean, a small, mechanical mind dreaming of the stars, until a sponge diver stumbled upon its resting place. It did not just survive the sea, it survived the erasure of its own era, waiting to tell us that the ancients were far more capable than we ever dared to imagine.